Opening up with some growing pains, losing to the Broncos as well as the Rams. The next week, however, the Titans will get a leg over the Colts. After this, the Texans are up and will take the Titans down. The Cardinals will fall, however. Same with the Raiders. Lose to the Patriots, the Colts and Chargers, lose to the Texans again, lose to the Seahawks, beat the Jaguars, lose to the Browns and 49ers, lose to the Chiefs, beat the Saints, and then end the season with a loss to the Jaguars. I think Cam Ward will buy himself more playing time despite the poor record, but the Titans have a few too many problems to be a good team at the moment. Opening up the season against the Rams, coming up a bit short with a loss. Continuing the streak with a high-scoring loss against Tampa Bay. Then finally a win against the first divisional opponent of the season, the Jaguars. From there, a win against the Titans, a loss to the Ravens, the Seahawks, and the 49ers, beat the Broncos, Jaguars, and the Titans again, lose to the Bills, beat whoever's starting for the Colts, lose to the Chiefs, beat the Cardinals as well as the Raiders, then finally wrap the season up with 2 wins against the Chargers and the Colts. Another better than average year, but not much of a leap compared to the previous 2. At the time of this prediction, we still don't know who's starting at quarterback for the Colts, but either way, my prediction isn't going to change all too much. Opening up with a loss to the Dolphins as well as a loss to the Broncos, real sting here with a loss to the Titans as well. This also gives the Titans their first win of the season. Yet another loss, this time to the Rams, followed up by the Raiders and the Cardinals. The Colts finally get their first win, and the momentum continues, beating the Titans. Steelers get the best of them, the Falcons do not. Chiefs use their magic and win, lose to the Texans and the Jags, beat the Seahawks, lose to the 49ers and the Jags again, then finally end the season with yet another loss. I expect a pretty poor season from the Colts this time around. Opening up against the Panthers, a close loss to start things off, playing the Bengals next and losing as well. On top of this, playing the Texans and also losing. However, the season finally gets started with a win against the 49ers. Back to where we were with a loss to the Chiefs, return to greatness with a win against the Seahawks, lose to the Rams, the Raiders, Texans, and Chargers, finally beating the Cardinals, back to losing with the Titans, beat the Colts, lose to the Jets, beat the Broncos, and then finally end the season with back-to-back wins against the Colts and the Titans. Opening against the Bengals this season as well as a loss. The Ravens are next week, handing the Browns a loss. The Packers and Lions continue this rough start for the Browns with 2 more losses, but then the Browns get a nice streak with wins against the Vikings, Steelers, and the Dolphins. Back to losing, this time against the Patriots, rebound against the Jets, back to the Ravens, losing once again, also losing to the 49ers, but then beating the Cam Ward Titans. Beating the Caleb Williams Bears, tough matchup, lose to the Bills, beating the Steelers, and then wrap up the season with a loss to the Bengals. Improvement of a season overall, but definitely leaves a lot to be desired. The Steelers recently got their quarterback for the year, and I would be lying if I told you I was optimistic about it. They will, however, start the season like they always do. Opening up against the Jets, I think that will be a win. Next week against the Seahawks is also a win. The Patriots are also very much beatable. That's a win. Next up, the Vikings come and hand the Steelers a loss. The Browns with a divisional loss. The Bengals and Packers also hand the Steelers losses. The Steelers rebound with wins against the Colts and the Chargers, but the Bengals come back and win as well as the Bears. The Bills, Ravens, and Dolphins also hand the Steelers losses. The Lions and the Browns also get wins. I know the Browns sweeping sucks, but then end the season off with a win to the Ravens. The Ravens are back for another Lamar Jackson-led regular season, opening up with a big game against the Bills. Starting the season off with a revenge win plus a division win to the Browns. An interesting win against the Lions, and then another close loss to the Chiefs. Back on track, beating the Texans and the Rams, beat the Bears, beat the Dolphins, out of nowhere loss to the Vikings, get 2 easier wins against the Browns and the Jets, a high scoring but unfortunately a loss to the Bengals, beat the Steelers, back to the Bengals with a win this time around, a surprising loss to the Patriots, which will be somewhat similar to the Raiders' loss last year, lose to the Packers and lose to the Steelers, but by this point they've clinched the playoffs anyway. Opening the season up against the Browns as well as a win. Beat the Jags right after as well as the Vikings, beat the Broncos and then lose a tough one to the Lions. Beat the Packers as well as the aimless Steelers, beat the Jets, low scoring loss to the Bears, beat the aimless Steelers again, beat the Patriots, 2 big games back to back against the Ravens and Bills, and I think that they'll both be wins. Ravens again 2 weeks later, and this time it's a loss, beat the Dolphins and Cardinals, and then finally end off a solid regular season with a win against the Browns. Despite being second in the division this year, the Dolphins still ended with a losing record, which was especially disappointing considering they made the playoffs a year earlier. They opened the season against the Colts and Patriots, which should both be wins. The Bills are a tough one, likely a loss, win against the Jets and Panthers, lose to the Chargers, and then the first true surprise of the season with a loss to the Browns. Then a loss to the Falcons and the Ravens, follow this up with another loss to the Bills, and then Commanders. Finally end the losing streak against the Saints before losing a heartbreaker against the Jets. Beat the Steelers, lose to the Bengals, beat the Buccaneers, and then end with a win against the Patriots. Another underwhelming season for the Dolphins, unfortunately. Opening up the season with a win against the Raiders before following it up with a loss against the Dolphins and the Steelers. Beat the Panthers the next week and then a tough game against the Bills, which ends in a loss. Bring it back with wins against the Saints, the Titans, and the Browns. 2 NFC South matchups in a row, starting with an unfortunate loss to the Falcons, but then following it up with a win against the Buccaneers. Frustrating loss to the Jets, and then a high-scoring loss to the Bengals. Get an easier matchup this time around and win against the Giants, but then another tough matchup ending in a loss against the Bills. First real big win of this season against the Ravens, boosting team morale by beating a Super Bowl contender, just to lose to the Jets and the Dolphins the following weeks. To open the season, the Ravens are going to be pissed off after losing to the Bills last season, so don't be too alarmed by a loss here. The next few weeks will be right back on track with wins against the Jets, Dolphins, Saints, and Patriots. Continuing their NFC matchups, they win against the Falcons and Panthers. Another classic Bills-Chiefs matchup. I believe the Chiefs will continue their winning streak against the Bills this time around though. Beat the Dolphins again, lose a matchup against the Buccaneers, beat the Texans, beat the Steelers, lose to the Bengals, beat the Patriots and Browns, lose against the Super Bowl champions, and then end off the season with a win and a higher-end playoff spot. Opening up the season still searching for an identity, starting with 2 back-to-back losses. Then a win against Tampa Bay, which is mostly self-inflicted by Tampa themselves. Right back on track with a loss to the Dolphins, as well as a loss to America's team. Beat Bo Nix, lose to Bryce Young, lose to the Bengals, and then lose to the Browns. Finally get a win against the Patriots, back on track with a loss to the Ravens and the Falcons. Back-to-back wins against the Dolphins, Jags, Saints, and Patriots, and then finally wrap up the season with a good old-fashioned loss to the Bills. Overall, a weak season as the team still searches for an identity. After multiple rough seasons in a row, with a change in coach, quarterback, and a new star running back, they hope to make some improvements. Week 1 is not that time, however, and they open up with a loss. They also lose against the Chargers as well as against the Commanders. They also lose in Week 4, bringing the team to an 0-4 record to start off the season. The streak finally ends against the Colts, but then back to normal against the Titans. The Chiefs also win, another win in Week 9 against the Jaguars, and then a loss the next week. The team makes its first step forward with a win against the Cowboys. They also win against the Browns, lose to the Chargers, beat the Broncos, lose to the Eagles and Texans, beat the Giants, and then end the season with a loss to the Chiefs. I don't think this season is going to be the improvement that the Raiders were hoping for this season. After ending the season last year on a poor note, the Chargers will act to make up for it. To start, they'll get 2 wins in a row against the Chiefs and the Raiders. From here, the Broncos will best them, make up for that next week against the Giants, also beat the Commanders and Dolphins, lose to the Colts, beat the Vikings and also the Titans, lose to the Steelers, beat the Jaguars and the Raiders again, lose to the Eagles, lose to the Chiefs this time around, lose to the Cowboys and Texans. Finally, to end the season, they play the Broncos, and unfortunately, they get swept this season. Playing Week 1 is Cam Ward's first NFL opponent. We'll start the season with a win. Playing the Colts the following week, I don't think they'll be very good, also a win. Finally, a real game against the Chargers, still a win. From here, another game against the Bengals ending with a loss, the Eagles next, another loss, just a tough matchup. The first rough one of the season, a loss to the Jets, mostly self-inflicted. Even worse, the Giants win the following week, which will get the fan base into a bit of a frenzy. Cowboys, Texans are also losses. Finally beat the Raiders, beat the Chiefs and Commanders, lose to the Raiders, the Packers, and the Jaguars, lose to the Chiefs, and then end the season with a win against the Chargers. I think that this will be an unexpectedly bad season for the Broncos, but I could very well be wrong about this one, so if I'm wrong, I'm more than happy to admit that. The team that no one but Chiefs fans want to see win. Unluckily for everyone else, I think that despite the poor Super Bowl performance, they will continue to be just fine. But not immediately, opening up with a loss to the Chargers. They will also lose the Super Bowl rematch. The Giants is a win though, and the Ravens as well. Beat the Jaguars, lose to the Lions, beat the Raiders once again, lose to the Commanders, beat the Bills, lose to the Broncos, beat the Colts, and also the Cowboys, beat the Texans, beat the Chargers, take down Cam Ward, beat the Broncos this time around, and then end the season on a good note, beating the Raiders. And of course, they will make the playoffs to see if they can once again make it to the Super Bowl.